Folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Alan from season 10 of Alone. Today's video, we are going to recap the heck out of Alone, season 11, episode 9. Let's get started. So before I get into the recap, folks, I just want to give a quick update on what just happened in my life. So last night, Lisa and I just got back from 4 days in northern Saskatchewan on Reindeer Lake. We stayed with Arctic Lodges, which was absolutely phenomenal. Man, the staff, the lodging, the fishing, and the food is next level. So if you're ever looking for a top-notch fishing adventure where it's rustic and remote, but you're treated with like high-end services, like the food and accommodations is just, I can't even describe to you how good it was. And the staff, super friendly and just really efficient and a smoothly run operation. I highly recommend checking it out if you want to go on a once-in-a-lifetime fishing adventure or numerous time fishing adventure. So they were able to drop Lisa and I out to my site. They took us out in the boat and they dropped us off there with our gear, and we spent the night, and I was able to show Lisa all the things I did out there, where I stayed, where I cleaned my fish, all the places I fished, where my shelter was, and it was just a really incredible experience. So keep your eye on the channel. I filmed it all and I'm making a video. It's going to take me a while to get the clips together, but hopefully in the next week I'm going to have a video on this channel of our adventure at Reindeer Lake. So the return to Reindeer Lake, I guess the video will probably be called, so check it out. So it is day 40 and 4 people remain on the show. The episode starts out with Timber, and if you remember last episode, he was struggling with the smoke not drafting up from his fireplace, and he was getting smoked out in the shelter. He was able to repair that this episode. That was his first scene. He took a section of his moose hide and he like hung it in front of his fireplace so it would kind of trap the smoke so it wouldn't come back into the shelter, and he was able to draft up the chimney. And it actually looked like it was working pretty well. So he was able to fix that and sort that out. And the next scene, they start talking about the mice. This is the time, in my experience out there, right around day 50 when it gets cold, those mice are looking for a place to winter and stay warm, and they really start becoming a pain in the... So he was like bow hunting them, kind of waiting for it to come out and looking for a shot at the mice, I guess. You know, whatever you got to do to entertain yourself, it would be kind of fun and it would help pass the time. I had a chuckle at that. He was bow hunting mice in the shelter. It looked like he had a trap or something set there too, but I mean, later on in the episode, Dub is having a real tough time with the mice as well, and it reminded me of my experiences with mice out there. I remember lying, like I always sleep with my arms when it wasn't that cold, with my arms kind of up around my head like this. I sleep on my stomach. I know it's not good. But I remember mice running over my arms at night. They were running over my sleeping bag. There was one actually, I think this made the edit. He was actually like snuggled under my sleeping bag, and I was sleeping on my jacket at the time, and it had like a fur lining, and the mouse was like buried in that fur lining, just chewing and chewing. I could feel the vibrations on my bed, and I kind of woke up, and there he was, and I was able to swat him with my hand and dispatch him, luckily. But I think in my shelter, I killed like 14 or 15 mice. I made like a Paiute deadfall trap, and I had it right beside my head so I could hear when it went off. And it worked really well, but man, those mice are a pain. They get into everything. So when they started getting bad, I just had to hang everything from my teepee so they couldn't get into it. Timber's next scene, he heads out to check his snares. Unfortunately, there's nothing in his snares. And you can tell in this episode that the dark days of the game are really starting. That's how I kind of refer to them when it's cold, there's snow, and it's just hard to keep positive. The darkness really starts creeping in. You're spending a lot more time in your shelter. And he said to the camera, he goes, man, I can't stay in my shelter anymore. I got to move around. So he just kind of went for a walk to clear his mind and stay positive. And I remember doing that exact same thing. It's like, you know what, I have nothing to do, but I can't stay in my shelter anymore. So you'd get dressed, you just kind of walk around. You go sit by the lake, or I don't know, go for a little walk, try to find a grouse, check your snares. It's really important to kind of keep moving and force yourself to get out of your shelter, even if it's for a short time. Because even a 10 or 15 minute break from your shelter, doing a walk around of your site, and I don't know, checking your set lines, checking your gill net, whatever you need to do, getting out is super important to keep that mental game strong. So that little walk Timber took to clear his mind and get out of the shelter, he went to his moose kill site just to kind of check it out. And he found the rib cage, and he harvests a few of the ribs, he breaks them off the spine, and he brings it back to his shelter to make something later on, whether he's going to whittle or whatever. So what he ends up doing, he ends up making gorge hooks out of the bone using his file, his Leatherman. And gorge hooks are just like, they're about, well, you can make various sizes depending on the fish. For pike, they got to be pretty big. Just like a sharpened splinter with a line just offset in the middle. So when the fish swallows it, you got to cover it in bait, you throw it in the set line, and the idea is they swallow the gorge hook with the bait on it. And when they try to move or you're bringing the line, it goes on an angle. That's why you put it just slightly offset so it angles when you pull it up, and it works just like a hook. And so later on the episode, I think this is a first on Alone, one of those gorge hooks actually caught him a really nice sized pike. Very impressive work on the gorge hooks, Timber. One thing I did notice Timber did that kind of concerned me a bit there, I was worried about him. They showed him walking towards the camera. Well, he showed himself because obviously he's doing the filming. They showed him walking towards the camera, and he had his axe in his belt, unsheathed. And those specialty axes, they're so razor sharp. I remember how sharp mine was. You could actually shave the hair off my arm. I would like to see him have that sheath on the axe when he's walking around, because man, one little slip up could take you out of the game with those razor edges on those axes. So the next time Timber went out to check his snares, one of the last snares he checked had a nice hair in it. I gotta hand it to Timber. Man, this guy is procuring food like crazy. He's got a moose, he's catching massive pike, and he caught a rabbit in his snare. Like, it's very impressive how much food this guy is getting. Timber speaks about how he's feeling happy and how he's feeling comfortable. Then he talks a little bit about his past. He talks about how he grew up with a lot of fear, and he got tired of this feeling, living in fear, and he wanted something different. He replaced this feeling of fear he had in him by helping others that were much less fortunate than him. He spoke about how he wanted to eliminate fear in other people's eyes. Man, that was a super powerful scene to watch. On day 51, when they showed Timber fishing, his river site is still open, and Dub's site is still mostly open as well. But then they show William's site, his river, and it's frozen solid. I don't know, but it's interesting to see how one contestant's site is frozen and the other two are still open, allowing them to fish. One of Timber's next scenes, they show him in a shelter, sitting by his fire, and he's got his shirt off. He must have that shelter buttoned down pretty nicely, the door sealed off, really well insulated, because if you can sit in your shelter with your shirt off when it's that cold, then it says a lot about how effective his shelter is. One of Timber's next scenes, he's talking about how thin he's becoming. He's really noticing all the weight that's coming off his body. But looking at him with the shirt off, like, he looks thin, yes, really low body fat percentage, but he's still carrying quite a bit of his muscle, and that's got to be due to all the protein that he's able to continue eating when he's out there. Season 11 is like a season of 3 firsts. William had 2 firsts, catching those grouse on a snare pole, smacking the water with a pole to kill small fish with a shockwave, and catching a fish on a gorge hook. Impressive season so far. Next up, we have Sarah. Sarah is complaining about how she's feeling super dehydrated. She gives herself like a little dehydration test. She pulls some skin up on her hand, and she says if the skin, you know, kind of stays where it is and doesn't go back down, that's a sign of being dehydrated. She heats up some broth and is attempting to rehydrate. She admits to the audience that she may not be great at what she's doing, but man, she is stubborn enough to keep on trying. She's pictured cutting some firewood, and she's really feeling how her body is breaking down and becoming much weaker. Obviously due to the lack of protein and food. And she's frightened by the changes she's feeling in her body. Her next scene, she's in her shelter and she's complaining about some pain in her kidneys. Whether it's a kidney stone or whether she's got an infection, we don't know, but she's obviously in some extreme discomfort, and you gotta admit, this lady is super tough. She gets up, goes for a bird walk, obviously trying to locate a grouse and harvest it with her bow. Unfortunately, she isn't able to locate any birds. Once she returns to camp, Sarah decides to tap out of the competition. She does not want to cause permanent damage to her system. Sarah showed extreme toughness throughout the entire competition. Lasting 42 days out there is something to be extremely proud of. Up next was Dub. Dub wakes up hungry and he decides to cook up a pot of fish head soup. No, I've spoken about it before, but man, fish head soup was one of my favorite things out there. After I boiled down a couple fish heads, drinking that fatty, greasy broth full of like collagen and oils and whatever else comes out of those bones and brains and meat, it was like a magic potion. I remember feeling so good after I consumed a pot of that broth. As Dub was sitting in his shelter, he started getting worried about fish escaping from his gill net, like maybe he's not checking it enough. So he decides to strap on a headlight and head down in the dark to check his gill net to ease his mind. And on his way down, the wolves are howling all around him. Really cool experience. Again, Dub has had wolves howling many times, and you saw those 3 wolves on the bank. I mean, what an awesome experience he's having out there with those wolves. Dub talks more about how he's always used the wilderness to escape, find comfort, and safety. So Dub has issues with his glasses again. They start coming apart. So he melts down some of the nylon paracord and he uses it like as a liquid hot glue to fix his glasses. It's day 47 and Dub is sick. They show him dry heaving in his shelter, and he's obviously in really rough shape. For a second there, I thought, oh geez, this might be over for him, because so many people in previous seasons have become sick, got some sort of stomach bug, and fought it for a few days and then ended up tapping out. So Dub said he was sick for 3 days, but he never tapped out. He just kind of fought through it, and he started feeling better by day 4. He also talks about how tough this game actually is. Entering into those dark days of the game, like high 40s from 50 onwards, when your body's deprived, you've lost all the weight, it's cold out. And with all that weight gone, for me anyways, it was a lot harder to stay warm. I always kind of had this chill. Even with a fire going in front of me, I remember having this chill that I couldn't really shake. And he did a really good job explaining how hard the game has become, and how mentally tough it is, how the days are getting darker and there's more time in your shelter, and the cold and the lack of food. It's just, I think he did a really good job kind of portraying to the audience how difficult the game has become. I also liked what he said about when you start thinking about tapping, how it starts out just a little tiny small feeling, and you start convincing yourself that it might be a good idea, and that feeling of the tap just grows and grows and grows, and it's harder to resist, because you got to remember, you have a button that you have at any time, and you can just press it and they come and get you. So it does take a lot of mental fortitude to fight that feeling, especially when you're struggling, you're not feeling well. He also talked about how he totally understands how other contestants in past seasons have tapped when they have stomach issues, and just how hard it is to fight through that discomfort. Dub's next scene kind of reminded me of a scene I had out there when I caught a fish that had some issues. It had these white cysts all over its guts, and it was pretty deep into the game, and I didn't want to lose this 6 pounds of meat that I had on this fish, even though it had these weird eggs or cysts all over its innards, and I had no idea what it was. So I threw away the guts. The meat appeared to be okay, and I just boiled it and boiled it and boiled it, and I ended up eating it, and I had no issues. So as he's cooking a piece of burbot, I think it was, he finds this big worm that was embedded in its meat, and he's looking at it, he's getting grossed out. He's like, oh God, I wish I hadn't seen that. But he boiled it for a long time, and he decides that it's probably fine. Everything that might be in there that could harm him was probably killed in the boiling process. And I'm pretty sure he ate it, which I think is a totally smart thing to do. It's day 53, and Dub feels pretty much completely recovered from his sickness. He heads down to his gill net, and he finds a 38-inch Inconnu in his gill net. What a massive chunk of flesh sitting in his gill net. I didn't know those Inconnu got that big. Very impressive fish. So he brings it up to his shelter to process and put away, and he pulls out a pike that he had caught previously, And man, it was disgusting. The mice had got into his little storage area there. Didn't really show how he was storing it. It looked like he kind of had it under his bed, kind of wrapped up in some spruce boughs. I'm not sure how he was storing it, but man, mice had got into the meat and completely made a mess of it. They poop and pee all over everything. And he believes that that could be why he was sick, that he consumed some fish that had been tainted by mice feces. So he salvages the tail, and he's too nervous to eat the rest of that fish, and he discards it. I'm not sure what the solution is to protect his fish from mice, possibly hanging it by a really thin piece of cord in a shelter. I mean, he's keeping it in a shelter anyway, so the whole idea of, you know, not keeping food in your shelter for bears and other critters is gone, because I did the same thing too at that point in the game, because, you know, that food is life. So in your shelter, at one point, it's like, well, I got to protect it, and I'll deal with whatever tries to steal it. The episode goes into William, and William's laying in his shelter, and he's talking about how his mind is just spinning, and he's thinking about too many things at once and can't really focus on tasks that he needs to do. And he comforts himself by looking at the picture of his family that he brought with him. I never brought a picture of my family because I felt that it might do more harm for me. And this is just me personally. I mean, everybody deals with family and missing people differently, but I kind of thought before I went into the game that I didn't want to bring a picture of my family, because I felt, for me, looking at that picture of my wife and my kids and my mom, my brothers, whoever was in that photo, would just make me more upset, and it wouldn't make me feel any better. So I opted not to take any photos of family with me. William heads up to his rock cache and puts some meat in his pot to make some beaver soup. And they showed later that it was one of the beaver's feet. It's this clawed, kind of nasty looking black foot that he boiled. I'm sure he drank the broth. And it actually contained quite a bit of fat, and he was happily nibbling away at it. And it appeared to be quite enjoyable for him to eat. Now, I want to go back to my last recap. I was a little bit confused about why William was so upset when he caught a beaver in his snare. A lot of people commented back to me in my comment section in my last video about why that was, because they had watched the Alone podcast, which I hadn't watched yet. It's because each contestant only gets one beaver tag. So William was mad because the beaver he caught on his one tag was a papoose, which is a small young beaver, and he was hoping for a big beast with that one beaver tag, so it totally made sense. William goes into talking about there's 3 sayings that he really believes in. Number 1, pain is just weakness leaving the body. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And the last one was, calm seas don't make good sailors. And he says he can attest to all 3 of those sayings. The next scene for William was him heading out checking his snares. Unfortunately, they were empty. So then he heads back to his food cache to collect some more meat from that beaver he had stored in there. And man, what a heartbreaking scene for William and the audience, obviously, who are really rooting for William. His beaver meat was gone. Something had gotten in there. He was sick to his stomach, and he couldn't figure out what it was, because it didn't appear, the rocks didn't really appear to be moved. So something small and thin with a voracious appetite must have gotten in there without disturbing too many of his rocks and consumed every bit of his beaver meat. I feel so bad for William. He is having so much difficulty with food storage and protecting his food from other critters. I'm hoping that William can figure that out and come up with another method to successfully protect any meat that he's able to harvest. Powerful scene next for William. Instead of perseverating over what happened with his beaver meat and getting himself down, how you handle the trouble, it's what's important. And he talks about how you should never cry over spilt milk. Wait a minute, that's saying number 4. I should have added that one in. So as I spoke about earlier in the recap, William's sight is frozen. So he's making ice ladder to get out on the ice and attempt his luck at ice fishing. As he's doing so, a small flock of grouse start landing around him. He's like, what? Brr, brr, brr. He's like, drops what he's doing, grabs his grouse snare pole, and does it again. He successfully hangs this snare on a pole in front of this grouse, slips it over his neck, and catches him. And he is elated, man. It was a really good scene for me. I enjoyed his happiness and how how he just had that negative experience with his beaver meat, but was able to totally recover, had that positive attitude, and got himself food for the day with that grouse pole. I was kind of wondering if he had gone after the other grouse with his pole, but they had flown off, but they didn't really show it in the edit. So we don't know if he was successful getting more grouse or they all just took off. Man, when he got that grouse, I loved it. He's like, oh man, what did he say? He said, you couldn't beat the smile off my face with a hammer. I'd never heard that one before. I might steal that from you, William. Good saying. After that, William did a happy dance. So the next scene, I'd never seen anything like this before, but he said in Labrador, people take the crop, which is that little bag in the grouse's throat where they kind of store the food they'd eaten, because they can head out. I think this is what it's for anyways. I'm not a grouse biologist or anything, but I think it's so they can get out in the open and they can eat as much food as they can, and it kind of stores in this crop, and it's kind of digested at a later time. But he took the crop out, he blew it up like a little balloon, tied it off, and made a little decoration out of it. Thanks for sticking around for the entire recap, folks. Join me next Friday for episode 10 recap, and have a good week. We'll see you next time.